Well, Channel 9 held its annual Upfront event earlier today, a presentation for advertisers on what's planned for 2026. TV Blackbox's Steve Molk was there and joins us now to share his insights. Molk, welcome back to McKnight Tonight.
Hello, Rob. It's good to be back.
It's good to have you here, mate. What was the event like? Were you impressed? How did it stack up compared to previous years?
Look, it was really interesting. All of the networks put on a big show, and particularly Channel 9 do a big event. Like, there was a lot of people in the one room. It was very slick, very well produced. In reflection, there was actually no talent on the stage. There was all of the executives all showed up, and that made sense because there's been a couple of key appointments that were made in the past 12 months. Matt Stanton was formalized as CEO after being interim. Amanda Lang, who's on screen right now, landed in the new head of television broadcasting role, coming over from Foxtel. So that's a really key appointment, and good to see her on stage there with Tom Maguire from The Age, who's in charge of publishing. All of the executives rolled out, but there wasn't talent. But they were all referenced and in all of the pictures on the screens behind them and showing that sort of stuff off. As far as the actual slate goes, look, it's always Upfronts are two things. They talk a bit about the content that's coming, and they talk a lot about the business because there's a lot of advertisers and agencies in the audience.
You're jumping ahead because I want to ask you about this. And on the pictures, I'm just going to throw this in. If I was the breakfast team at 3AW, I'd be very annoyed, because there were so many shots of Ben Fordham. It shows you these things are made in Sydney and aren't thinking of a national audience. There were so many shots of Ben Fordham. I think I counted 4 or 5 in the various presentations. And the only one I saw of the Melbourne team, who have this incredible share, they're much bigger than 2GB, the 3AW station, Ross and Russ. I think I saw a picture of Russell Howcroft, and maybe Ross Stevenson was in there as well on a slide, but there was certainly no video. But I was watching the live stream of the event. As you were getting to, it's usually all about the content, but this year it seemed to be all about sales and sales integration. In fact, they actually started straight off the bat talking about integration, and usually they'd go on about content.
It was a tough 20 minutes, let me tell you, after the acknowledgement of country to then go straight in. Look, and Matt James, I think
at least that was short. So there were small mercies. The welcome to country was thankfully very short.
Brilliant visuals and an excellent job by the woman that did it. However, as soon as we launched in, it was business. And I understand that's the nature of the audience that's largely there. People reporting about it from the media like myself are in absolutely the minority. But jeepers, even that felt like it was very copy-paste from last year, because that's my reflection on what we got in the schedule. So both the business talk, of course, there's advances and new things that they're doing, and they had this big opener that you're showing now that talked about key partnerships and how we can integrate your brand and do all sorts of great things to plug it. Super. But it felt very same to last year, both in the business sense and in the content sense.
Well, there was a lot of sales talk, as we're saying, but I thought Director of Sales Nikki Rook really made a good point. Is it Rook?
Let's say it is.
Okay. I thought Sales Director and 3, 2. I thought Sales Director Nikki Rook really made a good point when she talked about the power of the 30-second commercial. This is a little bit inside baseball, but when they're talking to advertisers, I thought this really cut through. Let's have a listen.
Of course, as new formats flood the market, it could be really easy to think that what once worked no longer does. Which brings us to the 30-second TVC, the subject of some debate of late. Because apparently, the most researched advertising unit of all time has suddenly stopped working, just when YouTube launched a brand new ad format. Which is, of course, terrible news for all those Super Bowl advertisers who paid $7 million this year for a 30-second spot. But rest assured, I have some good news, guys. It's simply not true. It's a brave marketer that's prepared to risk up to 47% of sales revenue on something so proven and reliable.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting to talk about the power of the 30-second commercial. What she was referring to with YouTube is YouTube obviously has the 5-second commercial, they have the 1-minute commercial, and YouTube are trying to changed the idea of what works. And she's saying you cannot beat a 30-second spot.
Oh, no, and in television land, absolutely. It pays a lot of dividends, though I would offer these days the benefit of a 30-second TVC is absolutely outweighed by an integration, and that is where we look at effectively sponsorship that's built into a program, like we look at The Block, and they made a big deal out of how they made a village where Bunnings and McCafe and Chemist Warehouse were all in the same little thing, like a little village on the Block site, and that allowed them to integrate it a whole lot easier, and that we can't skip it, right? We can't step away from that integrated stuff versus ads. Now, I also found it ironic that when they started talking about ad sales for online and BVOD, right at the end of the presentation, they talked about the power of the 6-second commercial.
Yes, which is what YouTube talk about. They talk about that you can have a powerful 6-second commercial, or if people don't like what you're selling, 6 seconds is too long. But if they love what you're selling and love your creative, 1 minute isn't long enough. Molk, I'm just going to interrupt the interview for a moment because we've got new viewers of McKnight Tonight who haven't been on the long journey when you were with me at TV Blackbox. We still are co-owners of TV Blackbox, and they're like, some of my watchers in the chat are referring to you as Molky Molk, and people are saying, who's Molky Molk? They don't realize that I used to call you Molky Molk for some strange reason on the TV Blackbox podcast. So that's what that's about. All right. So people know. Now, on the content point of view, let's move to content. They did announce a new show called Shark. Besides the obvious, what's that about?
Well, Rob, 6 celebrities will be taken to the Bahamas where they will be forced to confront real, actual live sharks in the water with a shark attack survivor, Paul de Gelder. He's also an environmentalist who favours protecting sharks and those sorts of things Now, glorious that they've given us this idea. It's a brand new format, Australian conceived. 6 celebrities. They could only name 2. What do you think that says about the success of this format already, Rob?
Look, I'm showing this overlay because that's literally all they showed, which means there is no show yet. It's an idea. It's what did Donald Trump call it? I've got concepts of an idea.
It's very much thoughts about what it could be. Now, look, to be fair, they're probably still locking in the other 4, right? Not a minute has been filmed of this show, but they made a big deal out of it. I will be surprised if it airs any time before November 2026.
Oh, yeah. And look, there was a legendary programmer at Channel 9 called John Stevenson. And I once attended when he had moved to 7. And I once went to a workshop with him when I was working in promos. And he did a guide to what rates. And number 1, sharks rate. And it's like Channel 9. I feel like they were going through some old files and, oh, hang on, here's Steve-O's list of what sharks. Oh, let's make a show about sharks.
The timing, right? Because about when they would have been putting this together, Shark Week would have been on Discovery.
Yeah, so absolutely.
You tell me where this idea came from. I don't know. There were a couple of other new shows that they brought up. Shark was certainly the big one.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that. What else can we expect?
One that they've got a whole bunch of footage done on, as in it's not in the can completely. In fact, the 2 stars are flying out tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. to go over to Sicily to complete their house. €1 house. It's called. Darren Palmer and Shayna Blaze from The Block bought a house in a town in Sicily for €1 whole.
That actually looks pretty good and sounds pretty good.
Yeah. You can imagine how good a condition that house is in. It's not. It's pretty shoddy, but they, of course, go through the process of emptying it out, tidying it up, and then, of course, transforming it with their style. And that's the bulk of what's going to happen in this little last stint that they're going over for tomorrow is to do the finish interiors and those sorts of things. I think it looks really good. And if you're into sort of your decoration and you like Darren or Shayna as talent, they're both great talent for TV. I think this will do great. Probably going to be tacked in around The Block when that airs next year for its 22nd season.
Which is amazing and still doing gangbusters. What else can we expect from 9 Year? It seems to be pretty much rinse and repeat, doesn't it?
Oh, very much copy-paste. There's only like 6 new shows entirely that they've brought forward. Of course, they are the Olympic network for now, so we're going to get the Winter Olympics. They did make a big push about that, and fair enough. The thing that I thought was interesting, and maybe we will see this in a separate release or upfront from Stan, no drama. there was no drama announced at all. Just reality and documentary like, what's it called? Outback Murder Highway, or Events That Changed Australia, that kind of thing. They've also announced a new, I guess, partner program called MAFS After the Dinner Party, which is going to air Wednesday nights on Stan after the Wednesday night dinner party when MAFS is running. Basically looking at all of the aftermath, and it sounds like
I thought the dinner parties were Sundays.
No, it's going on Wednesday. Well, they announced it's going on Wednesdays because Sundays.
Okay, so that is a change, right? Because I'm not misremembering.
No, Wednesdays is when the dinner party is, and then Sunday night is when they sit down with the experts.
Ah, okay.
So after the dinner party, Wednesday night on Stan, after the dinner party episode ends, is going to happen. They were making big noises about that because otherwise it's MAFS, The Block, Lego Masters. Of course, they talked about The Golden Bachelor, which is about to air on 9 when The Block finishes up. They didn't make mention of it for 2026. However, the mail that I have is that to sign for the format, they had to agree to 2 seasons. They're just keeping their powder dry about announcing season 2 until they can shout about the ratings for it.
That's pretty typical these days. You'll find that a lot of shows have a 2-season minimum because the production company has a lot of setup costs, and it's the second season where they actually make their money. So the networks have to commit or pay a substantial fee if they don't run it. And it does sometimes happen, but that is a thing. You talked about Stan and you talked about drama. I felt like there was a big pivot into promoting Stan. Stan was mentioned so many times. We even had a big reel about Stan. Are we seeing a change in the priorities for 9 towards Stan?
I think it's an integration, making sure that everyone recognises that Stan is a part of the 9 fold. We've had Stan for 10 years now. So it's right that they should be crowing about its success because it has been delivering some pretty great content to us and has some of the best overseas content going around connected into it. So I think Stan as a part of the 9 bigger branding play is a really smart move to remind particularly advertisers that Stan is 9's because Stan now has an advertising tier along with the subscription tiers. So they're still selling to their advertisers and agencies. You can advertise on Stan along with our commercial broadcaster, along with our BVOD content.
Can I ask a question about Stan? And I don't know if this is true or not. Was the original plan to team up with 7 and 10, and that's why it's called Stan, because it was 7, 10, and 9? Is that true, or have I made that up?
I think it's an excellent piece of rumour that flew around certainly
at
the time that it launched.
It fits.
And look, it absolutely could have, but so does other acronyms that I can't say on this fine program, Rob. I think as much as anything, it certainly could have fit the bill because at the time, 10 was still, publicly owned the same way that 7 and 9 are. And nobody but 9 at that point had any kind of moves towards the subscription streaming kind of service like Stan is. So it could have been that was the thing and they fell apart at the last minute, or it's just a clunky name that makes us remember what it's called.
Maybe. It's just in my head. There are some things that are just in my head and I don't know why sometimes. Someone's made the point that, Sarah was there with Carl in pictures, but I've got to say it wasn't. I still, if I was Sarah Arbo, I wouldn't be feeling confident because it certainly wasn't a whole The Today Show with Sarah and Carl. I think there still could be a Sam Armitage factor here.
See, that's not an unreasonable claim in that there wasn't a lot of noise made about the Today Show. Yes, Sarah and Carl were seen as the images whenever the Today was mentioned as part of its thing, and Sarah and Carl turned up together and sat together in the audience as a part of the presentation. I would offer that it's certainly premature to suggest that maybe Sam Armitage is going to take that gig. Who knows? The challenge for it is, though, that it wasn't just Today that we could say had a low profile. They didn't highlight any of their 6 p.m. newsreaders around the country other than mention that each of the news products are made locally by people who live locally for that market. So Amanda Lang, in talking about that, did lean into that process, but didn't specifically point out, and, Pete Overton's doing a great job. He's been in the chair for 17 years, yada, yada, yada.
Well, that's a good point. Hey, there's always drinks afterwards at these things. What was the reaction to the presentation by those you caught up with?
Yeah, it was, those that care about the business side kind of went, yeah, I mean, we basically knew all of that, or we're pretty much prepared for that. As far as the content side went, it was really a feeling it's just copy paste. And I get it, because if it's working, why do you want to break something that isn't broken?
True.
Or fix something that isn't broken? So there's elements of, I understand that. It was, for mine, the most underwhelming, at least from a content schedule point of view, the most underwhelming upfront that Nine have delivered in the 15 years that I've been doing this. Now, that could just be the season. That could just be 2026 is what it is. Because we also have to acknowledge that while Nine and Amanda Lang particularly crowed about, what did she say? Nine is the undisputed home of sport. Now, she also said that at a Foxtel upfront 3 years ago, but different contexts and different audiences.
I love it when they use the term undisputed. Don't get me started on when Channel 10 was saying undisputed, under 50s undisputed. Channel 10 and I had a big dispute about that one. There were lawsuits involved.
You can argue, but you can't argue. Anyway, it's the undisputed home of that. Nine are deep in conversations with the NRL, because the current NRL broadcast deal finishes at the end of 2026. So they crowed about, the NRL finals and the NRL going to Vegas and State of Origin on Nine exclusively, all that great stuff that they can do. Because come 2027, unless they have really, really deep pockets, it might not be exclusively on Nine. State of Origin streamed might be somewhere else.
Which would be a big problem, because when they did a section where they went through every month of the year, and geez, they relied heavily on the NRL to fill that out. Hey, Steve Molk from TV Blackbox, thank you for joining us tonight with your insights. I hope you had a great day. We'll get you on again soon to share your thoughts on the television industry. Thank you so much, mate.
Cheers, mate.
Fun, insightful interviews from a washed-up producer with nothing to lose. Night to night, but night to night, but night to night. It's good night from McKnight to